Advaita Gadadha Gaura Bhaktavrind. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So with somewhat a very shaky start yesterday, today the internet seems stable. Let us continue to read. Would somebody like to read? I think we have to read from here. But I would just like to, because this struck me, this last sentence of the previous paragraph where Prabhupada is saying that Bhagavatam is so arranged, and if one really studies Bhagavatam right from the first canto, first chapter, and goes systematically studying the Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada is saying one is sure to become God-realized soul at the end of finishing the first 9 cantos. So before actually reading the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Vrindavan, if we actually study Bhagavatam chapter by chapter, canto by canto, systematically, we will be able to be God-realized. And so then we will actually be able to relish the 10th canto. Because some people jumped directly to the 10th canto, but in order to actually relish 10th canto, we need to go through all of them. So, yes. Would somebody like to read this?
I can read.
Please.
Hare Krishna. The 10th canto is distinct from the first 9 cantos because it deals directly with the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. One will be unable to capture the effects of the 10th canto without going through the first 9 cantos. The book is complete in 12 cantos, each independent, but it is good for all to read them in small installments, one after another. I must admit my frailties in presenting Srimad Bhagavatam, but still I am hopeful of its good reception by the thinkers and leaders of society on the strength of the following statement of Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.11. Tat Vag Visargo Janatagha Viplavo Yasmin Prati Shlokam Abadavati Api Namani Anantasya Yasho Ankitani Yach Shranvati Gayanti Grinanti Sadava. Sorry, I'm not reading it well.
No, it's very good. Thank you.
On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a transcendental creation meant for bringing about a revolution in the impious life of a misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literature, even though irregularly composed, is heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest.
So here Bhagavatam is saying that, when we read some books, then we want to read like nice poetry and it's put together nicely. But any book which is speaking about the glories of God, it is a transcendental book. So not so much importance is given to the grammatical part as much as to glorifying the Lord. But we have been reading Bhagavatam, and then we are seeing that it's very poetic too, Sometimes some of the examples and comparisons which are given is very poetic. And what is the reason to to put about such a literature is to bring a revolution in our life. We are misdirected. We have gone away from God. So by reading Bhagavatam, which is full of glories of the Supreme Lord, about his devotees, it's to bring a change in our heart, a change in our consciousness. And those who are actually pure, those who are actually honest, they glorify such literature, even though they may not be composed perfectly. The grammar might not be proper, or because some people may be very more putting stress, oh, the grammar is not right, or this is not, the way it's put is not nice. But the devotees, what they are interested to hear, just the glories of the Lord. And by hearing the glories of the Lord, our consciousness gets purified. A revolution in the empire's life. We see the word revolution, that, the life completely changes. We are misdirected, but when we are hearing the glories of the Lord, then it can help us become God conscious. Om Tat Sat A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Thank you. Introduction. Would somebody like to read? You want to continue reading?
Can I read?
Yeah, Deepika, you can read.
Hare Krishna. Introduction. The conception of God and the conception of absolute truth are not on the same level. The Srimad Bhagavatam hits on the target of the absolute truth. The conception of God indicates the controller, whereas the conception of absolute truth indicates the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies. There is no difference of opinion about the personal feature of God as the controller, because a controller cannot be impersonal. Of course, modern government, especially democratic government, is impersonal to some extent, but ultimately the chief executive head is a person, and the impersonal feature of government is subordinate to the personal feature. So without a doubt, whenever we refer to control over others, we must admit the existence of a personal feature, because there are different controllers for different managerial positions. There may be many small gods. According to Bhagavad Gita, any controller who has some specific extraordinary power is called a Vibhutimat Sattva, or controller empowered by the Lord. There are many Vibhutimat Sattvas, controller or gods with various specific powers, but the absolute truth is one without a second. This Srimad Bhagavatam designates the absolute truth, or the Samam Bonam, as the Param Satyam.
So Prabhupada he's helping us understand God and absolute truth. So God indicates controller. Absolute truth, ultimate source. Nobody can be greater than him. So what happens? Controller, there are various levels of controllers. There are demigods also. That's why they are called like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma. They are controllers. They have received certain powers. And so they are also gods in their own right, little gods. But absolute truth is no one can become the absolute truth. That's the ultimate source. That's where everything is coming, everyone is coming from. So when we are saying controller, we have to understand that, like Prabhupada is explaining us, the government, it has its rules, the laws are made, so we follow the laws. And so we may think that, oh, it's very impersonal, we just follow the law. But we have to understand there is a lawmaker behind the laws. We forget by just following the laws, we forget there is a lawmaker, but there is. The president or prime minister, he's the one who is controlling the entire government, the entire country. He has the absolute power in that country. So whenever we are saying control, controller, there has to be a person behind it. This is something we need to understand right from the beginning, that when we say control or nature's laws, controller, so if there's control, there has to be a controller. If there's a law, there has to be a lawmaker. So, and we see that for different, like as we just said, the demigods, they have different powers to control, like sun god, moon god, right? So there are many, many small gods. And who are they getting their powers from? They're getting their powers from the absolute truth. Absolute truth is one without a second, as Prabhupada is saying, samam bonam. So Bhagavatam is speaking about the absolute truth.
The author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, first offers his respectful obeisances unto the Param Satyam, absolute truth. And because the Param Satyam is the ultimate source of all energy, the Param Satyam is the Supreme Person. The gods or the controllers are undoubtedly persons, but the Param Satyam, from whom the gods derive powers of control, is the Supreme Person. The Sanskrit word Ishvara, controller, conveys the import of God, but the Supreme Person is called the Parmeshvara or Supreme Ishvara. The Supreme Person or Parmeshvara is the Supreme Conscious Personality, and because he does not derive any power from any other source, he is supremely independent. In the Vedic literatures, Brahma is described as the supreme god or the head of all other gods like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. But the Srimad Bhagavatam confirms that even Brahma is not independent as far as his power and knowledge are concerned. He received in the he received knowledge in the form of the Vedas from the Supreme Person who resides within the heart of every living being. That Supreme Personality knows everything directly and indirectly. Individual infinite smell, person, who are parts and parcel of the Supreme Personality, may know directly and indirectly everything about their bodies or external features. But the Supreme Personality knows everything about both his external and internal features.
The samam bonam, absolute truth, param satyam. The very first verse, first canto, first chapter, first verse, Shla Vyasadeva is already telling us who is the absolute truth. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. He says, I offer my obeisances unto Lord Vasudev. And then he says, oh, why? Because, he is the supreme controller. There's no other person who can control him. He is the one who's giving everyone the powers, whatever degree of power they have to control, like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, they are controllers in their own right, you know. And who are they getting their powers from? Because there are other Vedic literatures where some Vedic literature, Lord Brahma will be called uh, as the supreme god, or, some Lord Shiva. But Bhagavatam says, from Bhagavatam, we understand that the supreme controller, that even Lord Brahma gets his powers from the absolute truth. Lord Shiva gets his powers from the absolute truth. And Krishna himself says this in Bhagavad Gita, that everything is coming from him. Everyone is coming from him. So the Supreme Person, and Brahmaji, how did he get his powers? How did he get his knowledge? He got his knowledge from the Paramatma in the heart, from the Supreme Person, here Prabhupada is saying, who resides within the heart of every living being. Tene Brahma Hridayaya Adi Kavaye. Krishna first spoke the Vedas into the heart of Brahmaji. Krishna is the original speaker of the Vedas. So all the knowledge that anyone has is coming from the Supreme Person. all the strength that anyone has is coming from the Supreme Person. All the ability to control that anyone has is coming from the Supreme Person. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He is the source of everything and everyone, of all the energies. So we may know everything about our body or about the outside world, but the Supreme Lord knows everything about everyone completely. We may know to a very tiny degree, but the Supreme Lord knows everything about everyone and the material energy completely, because that is His position. He's the Supreme Person. And we are the parts and parcels of the Supreme Person.
Anyone wants to continue? Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. The words Janmadi Asya suggest that the source of all production, maintenance, or destruction is the same Supreme Conscious Person. Even in our present experience, we can know that nothing is generated from inert matter, but inert matter can be generated from the living entity. For instance, by contact with the living entity, the material body develops into a working machine. Men with a poor fund of knowledge mistake the bodily machinery to be the living being, but the fact is that the living being is the basis of bodily machine. The bodily machine is useless as soon as the living spark is away from it. Similarly, the original source of all material energy is Supreme Person. This fact is expressed in all the Vedic literatures, and all the exponents fact is of spiritual science have accepted this truth. The living force is called Brahmana, and one of the greatest acharyas, teachers, namely Sripada Sankaracharya, has preached that Brahman is substance, whereas the cosmic world is category. The original source of all energies is the living force, and he is logically accepted as the Supreme Person. He is therefore conscious of everything, past, present, and future, and also each and every corner of his manifestations, both material and spiritual. An imperfect living being does not even know what is happening within his own personal body. He eats his food but does not know how this food is transformed into energy or how it sustains his body. When a living being is perfect, he is aware of everything that happens. And since the Supreme Person is all perfect, if it is quite natural that he knows everything in all detail. Consequently, the perfect personality is addressed in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Vasudeva, or one who lives everywhere in full consciousness and in full possession of his complete energy. All of this is clearly explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the reader has ample opportunity to study this critically. Hare Krishna.
So, thank you. So when we are when we are reading of control, we have to understand there's a controller. And then, so Prabhupada is trying to help us explain that the ultimate source, the absolute truth, is a conscious person. From matter, nothing can be created. If we put together all the ingredients to make a dress, the buttons are there, the thread is there, everything we put together, it's not going to assemble by itself to become a dress. Or we have all the ingredients for baking a cake and we put it there. Till the time somebody comes and bakes it, the cake is not going to happen. Matter cannot move by itself. Matter is dead. It's inert. So who moves it is the soul, the individual soul. We are there, we will put the dress together, or we will put the cake together. Similarly, this entire universe, the entire material energy, who's moving it? Not the individual soul, but the supreme soul. Sure, we have our own capabilities. Yeah, we can put together a dress, we can put together a cake, but we cannot create those ingredients of making the dress or making the cake. We cannot create the grains, the seed. In the laboratory, the scientists cannot create a seed. Seeds are given by God. So Prabhupada is trying to explain to us that the Supreme Person is conscious, is a person. The Absolute Truth is a person, not just matter. When we're speaking of energy, for example, we individual souls, Prabhupada is helping us understand, we are eating the food and that food gets transformed into energy, but we don't know how it's happening. It's like automatic. But the absolute person, the supreme person, he knows how it's happening because he's the creator. He's the one who's put it all together. Once the soul leaves the body cannot develop. So it is the soul that is moving the matter. Similarly, this entire material cosmic manifestation, it is the Supreme Soul that is making it move. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Person. Otherwise, it's a machine. Like this small body, all the elements are there: earth, water, air, fire, ether. Outside in the universe also, these elements are there. So we are moving our body, the individual soul is there, but the entire universe, the Supreme Soul is moving. Of course, the Supreme Soul is also in our heart. The Paramatma is also in our heart, and by His grace only we are able to move. So it's the Supreme Person. He knows everything, past, present, and future. And we are going to study about the Supreme Person in Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first verse of the first canto, first chapter, Srila Vyasadeva is helping us point out that the absolute person is Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, one who lives everywhere in full consciousness and in full possession of his complete energy. So God, he is completely conscious at all times. And he is the owner of all the energies. All the energies. We may try to compete with God, but there is a difference between our capacity and God's capacity. The absolute truth from whom everything is coming, from whom everyone is coming, who's the creator of the energies. We eat our food, we get the energy, but we don't create the energy. We don't know how it's happening. So in Bhagavatam, we will be studying this. So can somebody please continue to read?
In the modern age, Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu preached the Srimad Bhagavatam by practical demonstration. It is easier to penetrate into the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam through the medium of Sri Chaitanya's causeless mercy. Therefore, a short sketch of his life and precepts is inserted herein to the help reader understand the real merit of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Lord
It is
Chaitanya's...
imperative that... Okay.
Yes, please. Yes. Please continue reading.
It is imperative that one learn the Srimad Bhagavatam from the person Bhagavatam. The person Bhagavatam is one whose very life is Srimad Bhagavatam in practice. Since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is absolute personality of Godhead, he is both Bhagavatam and Bhagavatam. No,
Bhagwan and Bhagavatam.
Yes, Bhagwan and Bhagavatam. Yes, sorry. In person and in sound. Therefore, his process of approaching the Srimad Bhagavatam is practical for all people of the world. It was his wish that the Srimad Bhagavatam be preached in every nook and corner of the world by those who happened to take their birth in India.
Prabhupada is telling us that we can easily approach Bhagavatam, we can easily understand the essence of Bhagavatam if we go through Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhagavatam is revealed to us. Lord Chaitanya, he wanted Bhagavatam to be read and taught everywhere in the world. And he said, especially the people who are born in India should do this work of spreading the message of Bhagavatam everywhere throughout the world. So, Bhagavatam should be heard from the Bhagavat, the person Bhagavatam, the one who is following the teachings of the Bhagavatam. He is a Bhagavata. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We are reading that, we are saying that before we read Bhagavatam. So service to Srimad Bhagavatam and service to the Bhagavata who is following Srimad Bhagavatam, who is living by the principles of Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is the absolute personality of Godhead himself. He's the supreme personality of Godhead himself. So he's both Bhagwan and Bhagavatam. He came as the form of a devotee. He taught us how to live according to principles of Bhagavatam. And he's the Supreme Lord himself. So Prabhupada is saying his approach, his process of approaching the Bhagavatam is practical for all people of the world. And so that's why Prabhupada is, in the introduction, he's spoken about Lord Chaitanya.
Can I read again? Hare Krishna.
Yeah,
The Srimad
Yes.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, of whom we have preliminary information from the text of the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone, regardless of what he is, who is well versed in the science of Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, can become an authorized preacher or preceptor in the science of Krishna.
So we can see, science, practical application of knowledge. When we have knowledge, it has to be practically applied. Then it becomes Vigyan. Realized knowledge becomes Vigyan. That's why I said science. There's Gyan, which is knowledge. But what we are trying to get is Vigyan, practical application. Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of Krishna, absolute personality of Godhead, to give us this realized knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita is like the preliminary knowledge Prabhupada is helping us understand. You know how we have undergraduate school, then we have graduate school, then we have PhD. But all is needed. Not that one can go directly to PhD without doing undergrad. No, you can't. So after studying Bhagavad Gita, helps us to understand Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya, he stressed on both Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. He said, we should understand this knowledge of both Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and give this knowledge to others.
There is a need for the science of Krishna and human society for the good of all suffering humanity of the world. And we simply request the teachers of all nations to pick up this science of Krishna for their own good, for the good of society and for the good of all the world's people.
Yeah. And, as we keep reading Bhagavatam, we keep hearing, Prabhupada saying that, God-conscious society, how in Vedic times, everything was centered around Krishna, around the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how people could live peacefully, happily, at the same time cultivate spiritual knowledge. So Prabhupada is saying there is a need, for each of us to study Bhagavatam and to teach Bhagavatam so the world can become more peaceful, good for society, good for everyone. and at the end of life that we can go back home, back to Godhead.
A short sketch of the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great apostle of love of God and the father of the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord, advented himself at Sri Dhama Mayapura, a quarter in the city of Navadvipa in Bengal, on the Falguni Purnima evening in the year 1407 Shakabd, corresponding to February 1486 by the Christian calendar. His father, Sri Jagannath Mishra, a learned Brahmana from the district of Sylhet, came to Navadvipa as a student because at that time Navadvipa was considered to be the center of education and culture. He domiciled on the banks of the Ganges after marrying Srimati Sachidevi, a daughter of Srila Nilambara Chakravarti, the great learned scholar of Navadvipa.
Lord Chaitanya, he is the one who told us Prema Pumartha Mahan. He was openly giving love of God to everyone. He's the one who inaugurated the Sankirtana movement, the Kali Yuga Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan. So Lord Chaitanya came to give us this Kali Yuga Dharma. And he appeared in Mayapur, Sridham Mayapur. His father's name is Jagannath Mishra. Jagannath Mishra had come to Navadvip. Why? Because in those days, Navadvip was like anybody wanted knowledge, wanted to learn, education, they would go there to Navadvip. And he married Sachi Devi. So Lord Chaitanya's mother's name is Sachi Devi. Sachi Devi is the daughter of Nilambar Chakravarti. Nilambar Chakravarti was also a great scholar of that time, great astrologer, great scholar of that time.
Jagannath Mishra had a number of daughters by his wife, Srimati Sachi Devi, and most of them expired at an early age. Two surviving sons, Sri Vishwarupa and Vishwambhara, became at last the object of their parental affection. The 10th and the youngest son, who was named Vishwambhara, later became known as Nimai Pandit. And then, after accepting the renounced order of life, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
So Lord Chaitanya, when he was born, he was named Vishwambar. His grandfather, Nilambar Chakravarti, named him Vishwambar, maintainer of the entire universe. And because he was born under a neem tree, the women would call him Nimai affectionately. And of course, he had other sisters, but they all died. So only his brother survived, Vishwarup, and he himself, Nimai or Vishwambar. And later his name is Lord Chaitanya, after he took up sannyas.
Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his transcendental activities for 48 years and then disappeared from this mortal world in the year 1455, Shakabd at Puri. For his 24 years, for his first 24 years, he remained at Navadvipa as a student and householder. His first wife was Srimati Lakshmi Priya, who died at an early age when the Lord was away from home. When he returned from East Bengal, he was requested by his mother to accept a second wife, and he agreed. His second wife was Srimati Vishnupriya Devi, who bore the separation of the Lord throughout her life because the Lord took the order of sannyas at the age of 24, when Srimati Vishnupriya was barely 16 years old.
So Lord Chaitanya was here on this earth only for 48 years, and he took sannyas at 24. he had gotten married, but his first wife, she died, Lakshmi Priya. She died. So Sachimata told Lord Chaitanya again that, no, you please get married again. And he married again, Vishnu Priya Devi. But he had to leave her. When he took sannyas, he left her. And how she was feeling the separation is there so much described in Caitanya Caritamita.
After taking sannyas, the Lord made his headquarters at Jagannath Puri due to the request of his mother, Srimati Sachi Devi. The Lord remained for 24 years at Puri. For 6 years of this time, he traveled continuously all over India and especially throughout southern India, preaching the Srimad Bhagavatam.
So after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, he was 24 years old when he took sannyas. So now balanced 24 years, he stayed at Jagannath Puri because his mother was, she was feeling so much separation. She's like, he said he would go to Vrindavan, but she requested him stay at Puri. So at least she could keep getting news of him. And out of this 24 years, the first 6 years he was traveling continuously all over India, preaching. He wanted to give this knowledge of Bhagavatam, he wanted to give the holy name to everyone, especially in South India.
Hare Krishna. Sneha, you want to continue?
Yeah. Lord Chaitanya not only preached the Srimad Bhagavatam, but propagated the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita as well in the most practical way. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna is depicted as the absolute personality of Godhead, and his last teachings in that great book of transcendental knowledge instruct that one should give up all the modes of religious activities and accept him, Lord Sri Krishna, as the only worshipable Lord. The Lord then assured that all his devotees would be protected from all sorts of sinful acts and that for them there would be no cause for anxiety.
So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 66, Sarva Dharmam Parityagya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Moksheshami Masucha. That is his teachings. He's saying, abandon all varieties of religion. Just surrender unto me. Krishna is saying, you give up all, you might have some beliefs, some faith. Give up all those things, what you're doing. You just surrender to me. Accept me as the Supreme Lord. Worship me. Then we may get afraid that we might get some sinful reactions if we abandon everything else. Krishna is saying, I will protect you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So Lord Chaitanya also taught this principle. So he's teaching both Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the absolute personality of Godhead. So Lord Chaitanya is practically preaching that.
Unfortunately, despite Lord Sri Krishna's direct order and the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, less intelligent people misunderstand him to be nothing but a great historical personality, and thus they cannot accept him as the original personality of Godhead. Such men with a poor fund of knowledge are misled by many non devotees. Thus, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita were misinterpreted even by great scholars. After the disappearance of Lord Sri Krishna, there were hundreds of commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita by many erudite scholars. And almost every one of them was motivated by self interest.
Oh, Lord Krishna is saying, surrender unto me. He's saying there is a difference between the individual soul and him. He is the supreme soul. We are the individual soul. He is the supreme soul. He's saying the living entities are his parts and parcels. So he himself is declaring his supreme position. And Arjuna says in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is also accepting Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Arjuna is saying, not only me, but other authorities, Asita, Devala, Vyas, everyone is accepting Krishna as the absolute personality of Godhead. Like when there is some theory going on. So then we have to see, oh, who is the one who's backing this theory? Then we'll say, oh, such great scientist, Albert Einstein is backing the theory. Then we get faith in it, right? So Krishna is declared as the absolute personality of Godhead in all the Vedas, in all the scriptures. We simply have to accept it. That's all we have to do. We don't have to overthink it. But what happens is many people wrote commentaries on Bhagavad Gita and they have mistaken Krishna's position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and think of him to be an ordinary man or maybe a great man, but a man, but somebody who's equal to us, or maybe they think, okay, he had powers, but they think that, oh yeah, even we can become Krishna, that there's no difference. And that is where the misunderstanding is. Because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one can become Krishna at any time. Nor will be Krishna in the past, nor currently, nor in the future can we be. Krishna was always Krishna, we were always ourselves, individual souls. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all the other kings, nor in the future shall either of us cease to be. So our individuality, Krishna is explaining, continues eternally. In the past, we were individual souls. Currently, we are individual souls. In the future, we will remain individual souls. Even after liberation, our individuality continues. In the spiritual world is full of spirit souls in their spiritual bodies. So,
Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same Lord Sri Krishna. This time, however, he appeared as a great devotee of the Lord in order to preach to the people in general, as well as to religionists and philosophers about the transcendental position of Sri Krishna, the primeval Lord and the cause of all causes. The essence of his preaching is that Lord Sri Krishna, who appeared at Braj Bhumi, Vrindavan, as the son of the king of Braj, Nand Maharaj, is the supreme personality of Godhead and is therefore worshipable by all. Vrindavan Dham is non-different from the Lord because the name, fame, form, and place where the Lord manifests himself are all identical with the Lord as absolute knowledge. Therefore, Vrindavan Dham is as worshipable as the Lord. The highest form of transcendental worship of the Lord was exhibited by the damsels of Brajbhumi in the form of pure affection for the Lord. And Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends this process as the most excellent mode of worship. He accepts the Srimad Bhagavad Puran as the spotless literature for understanding the Lord, and he preaches that the ultimate goal of life for all human beings is to attain the stage of prema, or love of God.
Krishna, he said, surrender unto me, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. But what happened is people got misdirected, people misunderstood, the knowledge was lost. What to do? So Krishna comes again. He came again 500 years ago as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He came to teach us how to surrender. What does it mean to surrender? He came to explain to us that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brajendra Nandan Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. Shyam Sundar Krishna, Brajendra Nandan, Krishna who stays in Vrindavan. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's like a teacher. You know, a teacher writes A, B, C on the board. She helps us write. Doesn't mean the teacher doesn't know ABC. She's just helping us so that we can understand how to write ABC. Lord Chaitanya, he is Krishna himself. He is the supreme absolute truth himself. But he came in the form of a devotee to teach us how we will be able to understand Krishna, how we can cultivate our love for Krishna. Lord Chaitanya says the goal of human life is to revive our love for Krishna. Love for Krishna is there in each and everyone's heart. Everyone's heart, no matter what is our belief, what is our faith, which planet we live, which species we are, each and every one of us has love for Krishna. And to revive that love for Krishna that is the goal of human life. Prema Pumartha Mahan. Lord Chaitanya also explains that Vrindavan Dham, because it's a dham where Lord Krishna appeared as his pastimes, is non-different from him. Lord Krishna, his name, fame, form, pastimes are all non-different from the Supreme Lord himself. So as Lord Krishna is worshipable, Vrindavan Dham is worshipable. His holy name is worshipable. His pastimes are worshipable. And Lord Chaitanya is saying, what is the most excellent worship that the gopis had for Krishna, the love that the gopis had for Krishna? That's the highest form of love. So he's teaching us to cultivate love for Krishna because their whole being, they exist for pleasure of Krishna.
Anyone else wants to read?
Okay, I can.
Yeah.
Many devotees of Lord Chaitanya like Srila Vrindavan Dasa Thakur, Sri Lochna Das Thakur, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, Sri Kavi Karnapura, Sri Prabodhananda Saraswati, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, and in his later age, within 200 years, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti, Sri Baladev Vidyabhushana, Sri Shyamanand Goswami, Sri Narottam Das Thakur, Sri Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and at last Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, our spiritual master, and many other great and renowned scholars and devotees of the Lord have prepared voluminous books and literatures on the life and precepts of Lord. Such literatures are all based on the Shastras like the Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and other histories, and authentic literatures approved by the recognized acharyas. They are unique in composition and unrivaled in presentation, and they are full of transcendental knowledge. Unfortunately, the people of world are still ignorant of them. But when these literatures, which are mostly in Sanskrit and Bengali, come to light the world, and when they are presented therefore thinking people, then India's glory and the message of love will overflood this morbid world, which is vainly searching after peace and prosperity by various illusory methods not approved by the acharyas in the chain of disciplic succession.
So Prabhupada is pointing out that the followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they have written such wonderful books, all spiritual books of knowledge, full of transcendental knowledge. They're the most valuable gems, but the worth is not known by anyone. But once one people will begin to understand these books, then there will be transformation. Because right now we are thinking that our peace, our prosperity can only be by material advancement. But these literatures, they point out that the most valuable jewel, devotional service to the Lord, love of God. Prabhupada is saying this message of love will overflood this morbid world once one can get this knowledge, the transcendental spiritual knowledge.
We'll continue or we'll finish.
We can read this one and then we can finish. It's almost.
The readers of this small description of life and the precepts of Lord Chaitanya will profit much to go through the books of Srila Vrindavan Dasa Thakur, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavata, and Srila Krishna Dasa Kaviraj Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Caritamita. The early life of Lord is most fascinatingly expressed by the author of Chaitanya Bhagavata, and as far as teachings are concerned, they are more vividly explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now they are available to the English-speaking public in our teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
Prabhupada is saying here he's just put a very brief description about the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. But in great detail, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has written about the earlier pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Chaitanya Bhagavat, and Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami has written the more focused on the teachings is Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Prabhupada has translated Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in English, and now it's translated in so many different languages. And Prabhupada condensed all the teachings in the book called Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. We had read this book recently also, this year, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself. He wanted us to study Srimad Bhagavatam and teach Bhagavatam. So we'll continue with this introduction on Monday. Yeah, tomorrow we won't read. We'll read on Monday. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for joining in.